So I've been using this Dyson micro vacuum for some months now, and the performance of it is really starting to degrade. This is clearly a lighter weight, smaller vacuum than most of the Dysons, so I'm not surprised that it's having more trouble earlier in its lifespan than a typical Dyson, but still, it clearly needs a deep clean, and I wanted to do a quick video about how that's gonna happen. So I've taken it apart. I have the primary components here, the motor, the primary cleaning head, which for me is this fuzzy one, and then the extension tube or wand. I'm going to take each of them apart to the extent as possible and try to figure out why this is not cleaning as well as it could. It might be a clog, it might be dusty, it might be dirty. There's a lot of things that could happen. Maybe something is stuck in here, but I've done standard maintenance, but once in a while, these things always need a deep clean. So let's jump right into it. So the first thing you're gonna wanna do is look at this big wand here. This isn't gonna be great video, but basically you want to look through each of the sides and make sure that there's nothing inside. Again, it's really hard to do on video, but get this whole look inside and you should see clear through the entire length of this thing. Okay, the cleaning head is a primary culprit for a lack of performance. That's especially true if you have one of these fuzzy ones, and if you have any pets, if anyone in your household has long hair, if you have kids with Legos, all these other things, they are serious factors and then can degrade the performance. I've let this thing get quite dirty in order to make this video as effective as possible. First thing you want to do is pull this piece out. By opening that, we can take this piece off. It's tool free. We can now slide this fuzzy beater piece out. Now what you can do is start to look inside and see how dirty this thing has gotten. What we want to do now is remove any excess dust from here. This is largely aesthetic. It won't affect the performance. We want to check for clogs. We could see this one doesn't appear to have any major clogs. We want to get any sort of hair or fuzz that's wrapped around the moving pieces. You want to cut all that out. You may want to use some tweezers or something like that just to get into some of the finer areas here. And again, the goal isn't really, at least for me, to make this perfect. You want to just make sure that any moving parts are able to move freely. While you're at it and you're in here, it's nice to get as much as you can, but if you can't get all of it, it'll be fine. It'll definitely be better than it was before. Okay, so that's much better. And I know people are gonna comment this, so I'll just get ahead of it. Almost all of these components can be taken apart. You can see some little screws in there. Some of them are a bit fickle. Some of them are like a tiny little posi drive and screwed in very tight into a piece of plastic. So in my experience, the less parts you have to remove from your Dyson, the better. So I'm going to keep everything as intact as I can. Some parts that are easy to remove, like this beater, I'll take off. Other than that, I'm gonna try not to take it apart. Okay, so as for the cleaning, you wanna be able to get in here and clean this stuff off. Again, some of this will be for aesthetic purposes, other will be for actual helping out. I like to use these little alcohol wipes. I'm sure there's 1,000 different things you could use, but you wanna get in here with some sort of solvent that's not too tough, just because the plastic isn't perfectly smooth and it will start to accrue some small amount of dust. More dust will catch onto that dust, and before you know it, stuff will go and get quite dirty and clogged up. You can see here, there's a friction point where this has been rubbed down. It's rougher than the rest, and it's picked up a lot of gross stuff, whereas over here, it's a little smoother. That never happened, and stuff gets clogged here because it just picks up and picks up. Here you can see the side I cleaned. Here's the dirty side. Again, it just takes a second, and I don't think this would degrade the performance too much, but if it only takes a second, it's worth doing. On the inside here, you can see there's some friction points. That is easier just to remove with a Q-tip or a chopstick or tweezers, whatever you would have. Just don't use something that's too sharp. You don't want to scratch this up and create more of those sharper friction points where stuff's gonna get clogged in a few weeks. Okay, so 5-6 minutes of cleaning later, and things are looking pretty good now. See all the dust and stuff is removed from there. The head is much cleaner. It's not perfect, but definitely clean enough. This area will be harder to get at because I didn't want to remove this piece, this motor piece. You want to make sure these wheels are spinning freely. It can be a little tough, so you might want to get a pair of tweezers and just kind of reach in there and pull out any hair or dust that's wrapped around them. I used to remove them, but this is actually sort of pressed into the plastic, and you can remove it once and pop it back in. You can remove it twice and put it back in. After 3 or 4 times, the plastic gets a little worn out, that little pin gets bent, and it's just not gonna work out anymore. Remember that there's some wheels up here as well. And again, you just want them spinning freely. The vacuum will move much better. When you're all set, you wanna get this piece, put this back in place, get this side piece, make sure there's nothing here. Yeah, this one's gotten pretty gross. So clean this one out and then put it back in place. Okay, so much better. Just put this piece in, has to go like this, there you go. And good to go. Remember that this piece is not designed to spin freely. It should spin easily, but this has that electric motor in there. And now the last component is the motor piece itself. There's a few different things to do here. First things first, this is your main filter. It gets quite dirty. The good news is the filter is washable, so you don't have to throw it out. You don't have to buy a new one. You could shake it out and put it back, or you can give it a full wash. If you haven't washed it in a few months like this one, and it's getting caked up, then you want to take it apart and give it a full wash. I've done a video on how to do that. So if you just search through the YouTube channel for washing a Dyson filter, you'll see that. Basically, you want to wash it in cold water and make sure it's fully dry before putting it back in place. So I've removed and washed the filter. It's looking quite clean. It's gonna need 24 hours to dry. I'm going to put that on a paper towel, set it aside, and let it sit. Now I have the motor unit. At this point, a nice thing to do is put it upside down, give it a couple taps, a little bit of a shake. Sometimes finer dust will accumulate in this area and it gets stuck kind of between the motor and the filter. It's mainly gonna happen if you vacuumed up something very light, like flour or a baking soda spill, something like that. The particulate can get stuck in here and really degrade the performance. See, a little bit of stuff came out, but nothing too bad. Now, open this vacuum up, push this piece here, and you could remove this head. The bin is relatively easy to clean. You want to get a paper towel, just a damp paper towel, or again, those rubbing alcohol pads. Give it a good wipe down. Nothing in here is going to affect the performance too much. You don't want to see areas like this. That's where dust is accumulating against a rough spot. But again, this isn't really going to degrade the performance, but this is happening after the vacuum has done its work. It's just really depositing stuff in here. So you're going to do a cleaning. You want it to look nice, make sure it's not wet. But then after that, as long as things are doing what they need to do, you don't really have to worry too much about it. Not much to be done here either. Again, give it a quick wipe down. Do not use anything wet. Do not wash this area. You could use a damp, like barely damp paper towel. You just want to make sure there's nothing too big or stuck. No real problems there. Looking clean. Set that aside, make sure it's totally dry. At this point, all the components are together. They're looking good. To reassemble it, it's quite simple. You want to get this piece and notice that there's sort of rails here on the bottom. Those rails go into this piece here. This dark gray piece wraps around those rails, and eventually things will get back. You don't have to attach the wand right now, but of course you can. The skinny side with the button gets inserted. Same with this piece. you'll hear a nice click. It's ready to go. And you can put the filter back on by putting it in and twisting it. Again, if your filter is wet or damp, make sure it's fully dry. At that point, your Dyson is completely clean and ready to go and should be ready for multiple months of use. Thanks for watching.